And we're live. Hello, book lovers. Welcome to the 131st episode of Authors Love Bookstores, broadcasting here on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Kimberly Hensle Lowrance. If you're new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome. We're a group of volunteer creatives who host online literary events to help support books, authors, and the wider publishing community. Here on Authors Love Bookstores, my co-host, Joe Moldover, and I bring you conversations between authors and their favorite indie booksellers to shine a light on storytelling, creativity, and the small businesses that enrich our communities. Today is our third anniversary show. Joe and I started Authors Love Bookstores during the early weeks of the COVID-19 lockdown, at a time when so much of the world felt unsafe and uncertain. I mean, we could argue it still feels unsafe and uncertain at times, but that was a particularly worse time. For us, the show quickly became a bright spot. And for many of you, we have heard the same. And during the past 3 years, we've gotten to talk to our literary heroes. We've gotten to champion authors across all genres, from romance and mystery to literary fiction and memoirs. And we've had the opportunity to spotlight booksellers in all over the US, Canada, and the UK. It's been a real honor to bring this show to you, and we are grateful that you continue to tune in. We'll include a link in the comments to our first show back in April 2020. We had Janet Fitch on the show. She's the author of White Oleander and Paint It Black, and I'm a big fan of her work. She was in conversation with Skylight Books. So be kind when you watch it. It was our first show ever, and maybe we've gotten a little better. Okay, so I can think of no better way to celebrate our third anniversary than by welcoming today's guests. Joe and I are thrilled to welcome our friend Julie Gerstenblatt to the show. We adore Julie, and we have been fans of her new book since we read early drafts of it in a writing class about 4 years ago. To celebrate her success today is just the best way to celebrate our show as well. So let me tell you about Julie and our other guest, Tim. Okay, so first, Julie Gerstenblatt, who's on your screen. In the blue, actually, we're all wearing blue today. So Julie Gerstenblatt holds a doctorate in curriculum and instruction from Teachers College, Columbia University. Her essays have appeared in the Huffington Post, Cognoscente, Grown and Flown, and many other outlets. She's also a college essay coach and a producer and on-air host for A Mighty Blaze. We'll include a link below to all of Julie's shows on the Blaze so you can watch them. Oh yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you start.
Nancy Thayer, though. That one was a good one.
Okay, so pay particular attention to the Nancy Thayer interview. So Julie's a native New Yorker, but she now lives in Rhode Island with her family. I have heard her say she moved to Rhode Island to be closer to Nantucket, and we'll talk about that today. And her first book out now is The Wonderful Daughters of Nantucket.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Also with us today is Tim Ehrenberg. Tim is the marketing director for Nantucket Book Partners, which includes Nantucket's 2 independent bookstores, Mitchell's Book Corner and Nantucket Bookworks. Tim oversees marketing for the Nantucket Book Festival and is a contributor to Nantucket's Lifestyle magazine, where he writes a monthly column, the Need to Read column of book picks. Tim also, if that's not enough, Tim also runs Tim Talks Books, which connects readers with his favorite authors. And by now, I'm sure you figured out that Tim lives full-time on Nantucket. Lucky, lucky Tim. Okay, enough of me. Welcome to you both. We're very excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. I should just say to our audience, if you have questions for Tim, for Julie, include them below in a comment, and we'll get to as many as we can. Yes, Susie, we agree. Daughters of Nantucket is fantastic. And yes.
Ronnie, that's my mom.
I know. That's your mom. Okay, lots of comments from the audience today. Terrific. So Julie, let's start with you. Tell us about what attracted you to write about Nantucket? What is it about this island that's so special to you? And then I was telling Tim before we went live that when we invited you to be on the show, your response was yes, but only if I could talk with Tim. So tell us about why you wanted to talk to Tim. Everything. What's going on? What is it about Nantucket?
Sure. Well, if you've been to Nantucket, then you know. And if not, I'll give you my personal history with the island. I've been going to Nantucket since the late 1970s. And I went for 2 weeks with my whole family, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, dogs. And we stayed out. We rented a house out on Pulpus Road, and it was magical. And those 2 weeks, I think, are like imprinted on me and have become a big part of who I am, what I care about. I think of myself as a beach person, a person who just loves to spend time with family and just hang out. We're not much of an action adventure group, we don't need to hike mountains, but we love to get on ferries and head to Nantucket. So that's why Nantucket, although I've been writing forever and didn't write about Nantucket until an agent I was working with said, that historical you keep talking about, I think is the one that you should write. And I was like, no, I don't write historical. I'm funny. I write like contemporary comedies. A Woman in Her 30s, Who, which did not sell. A Woman in Her 40s, Who, also did not sell. And my agent's like, yeah, maybe you should pivot. You sound really excited about this particular story, which I stumbled on, about the Great Fire of 1846, spending most of my time at the beach on Nantucket and not in the Whaling Museum. I really didn't know about it. And once I learned of it, I got hooked. So that's why Nantucket. And then why Tim, just because he's connected to Nantucket's literary community in a way that I am not, as a full-time, resident there. And as a book lover, it just felt like the perfect person to have on to discuss this book, especially a few days before Daffodil Weekend, when all three of us will be together celebrating independent bookstores, the island of Nantucket, and spring.
So what is Daffodil Weekend for the people who are watching who don't know Nantucket? What is that?
I mean, it's sort of the official opening of the island for the season, and to do so through the spring flower of daffodils. And what happens on the island is just incredibly fun. Tim can talk more about it, but there's a parade of cars, mostly antique cars, that are decorated with daffodils. You should Google it. Maybe not right now while we're talking, but after. You can multitask. You can do a little Googling. Cars decorated, people decorated, flower crowns, dogs decorated, contests for all of the above, including daffodils that people put into a competition as well. And it's just merriment. And then the car parade heads from town out to Sconset for picnicking and tailgating Saturday day and general merriment. What do you think, Tim?
I always describe it as the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, because living here in year round, we hibernate January through March, and Daffodil Weekend happens, and every business and every person out their window is bonjour, bonjour. I mean, it is just so, it's really magical. Nantucket is a special place to begin with. And the first time that we had moved there in March, I didn't know anything about daffodil. All of a sudden I started hearing about it, and they're like, yeah, you just wear some flower pants, and everyone just kind of picnics. And it has become one of my favorite Nantucket. We call it a Nantucket holiday. Everyone you walk past says Happy Daffy. It's something truly out of a storybook. It really is.
I love anytime you can use the word merriment in a sentence, right? Yeah. Like it's just like automatically makes you feel good. So Tim, you have lived in Nantucket full time for 10 years. It sounds like just how lucky you must be to live in such a beautiful place, and you get to work in books. Tell it, I don't know, a little jealous. I think we all are. Tell us about Nantucket Book Partners, the two bookstores. I mean, I think and their connection to one another and how they serve the Nantucket community.
Yeah, thank you. So I love that Julie said imprinted, because I think anyone who comes to Nantucket, it does imprint on you, and you have this connection to it, and it really is that special of a place. So Nantucket Book Partners is two bookstores. How lucky are we that on an island that 13 miles long and 4 miles wide, that we get two bookstores that are in walking distance. Yeah. And the owner, Wendy Hudson, really did a good job of keeping them separate. Even though Mitchell's has been open over 50 years, Bookworks just celebrated 50 years, they weren't always combined. They were separate owners from the beginning. But now Wendy Hudson owns them both, and she really has done a really good job of keeping them separate but together. We always say, you have to visit both for the full story. And so Mitchell's is that classic bookstore that you love, leather chairs, a Nantucket room upstairs that is just one of my favorite rooms that features all Nantucket sailing books and Nantucket fiction and everything. Julie's book is now proudly displayed up there. And so when we're lucky to have it. And Bookworks is more of it's on Broad Street, and it's more of a quirky, has a lot of sidelines, a new chocolate kind of corner with all this gourmet chocolate from around the world, up like a party type place, still a lot of books, and a really nice children's room. So they both really complement each other. And, you have people that go to both, some that just stay true to one. And it's amazing to be able to work with independent bookstores, and especially two of them.
I read a statistic that said during the summer, during the height of the season, Nantucket can see up to 70,000 visitors.
Yeah, I think that statistic is even...
You think it's low?
I think it's over 100,000. And especially when the pandemic happened. Everyone was kind of like, well, we can't go international, so where should we go? Let's finally take that trip to Nantucket, or let's make sure we really are utilizing our summer house on Nantucket. And everyone came. It was, the pandemic was awful for so many reasons, but there were, some positives, and A Mighty Blaze is one of them. Like, this show is one of them that probably would have never happened without it. And I do feel like Nantucket did see quite a boom in tourism for a very popular tourist place.
And the year-round residents, is it around 15,000? Would you say?
Yeah, I think I had always heard 12, so that probably is closer to 15,000. Yeah.
So it gives our audience just a sense of how much the island swells during the summer. And it's not like you can just walk to Nantucket. It's a commitment. You have to get a ferry reservation, or you have to fly there. So the people who are coming to Nantucket, they're committed to the island. They're committed to this vacation. And I wonder how that experience of having a smaller population of year-round residents to this enormous group that come during the height of the season, what that does to a bookstore, what that does to Nantucket Book Partners. Do you think it shifts the way you buy books or curate books? Do you feel that, or do you feel like this is who we are and people just come to us because they know this is our vision? Do you feel like you have to adjust in a unique or different way because of that sort of differing population?
Well, obviously the volume, because, the volume in the store is much different than the volume we'll start seeing now as far as how many books we order. But no, not necessarily. I mean, I think like we are one of the only businesses that truly stay open year round. We're open, both bookstores we're open 7 days a week. And it's saying a lot, because there are times that we don't have a customer that comes in maybe the entire day. And we do that because we believe, and I'm sure the show believes, that every community, the cornerstone of every community, should be a bookstore. Absolutely. And it is very important to us that if there is someone lonely and has nowhere to go, at least the light is on at the bookstore. And I think we're one of the only businesses that can say that on Nantucket Island. And I think we're proud to say it, even though it's, we all know it's not easy to keep a bookstore's doors open. Especially in a ghost town, which Nantucket can really be during those, school breaks. Everyone is pretty gone. It's pretty silent.
Last week on the show, we had on, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? We had on Da Shop, which is a bookstore in Oahu. And so another island bookstore. And the owner talked about how a very similar concept, that their bookstore is really for the community. It's not, they don't think like, and when tourists come, that's great. They love to have them, and they love their support, because it really makes a difference financially, obviously, but that ultimately they are there because of the community that exists in their space year round. Yeah. And so I think the idea what you're talking about, that a bookstore should be we just put it down in the comments. The cornerstone of every community should be a bookstore. We quoted you. Perfect. I think that's so true. And I think that's universal. I think we see that across the board, whether or not you're in Nantucket or in Hawaii. People really look to the bookstore to make a huge difference in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love that you have a Nantucket room, because that's what we want when we come. Okay, great comment. Congratulations on your anniversary. I have to stop. That is my college professor, Dr. Root. Thank you very much, Dr. Root. I love seeing you here. Okay, so
you should be so proud of you.
I know, it's like, very lucky. Okay, so you have a Nantucket room that we can go to and pick up a copy of Daughters of Nantucket. We should say we're going to include a link below in the broadcast where you can pick up a copy of Julie's book. And I imagine we can also get it signed if we, if Julie will be there this weekend.
I have book plates for the link, and then Julie will be there this weekend on Saturday, April 29th from 10:30 to noon. She so generously let me add Nancy Thayer, who we got early release rights for Nancy Thayer's book, All the Days of Summer, that actually comes out May 2nd. So Nancy will also be there, and I'm sure you'll maybe get to this, but it's Independent Bookstore Day, and which we always have to share with the Daffodils. So that, you know, we always try to like, how can we make our Independent Bookstore Day special? And there's just so much going on that day, so I can't wait. It's really exciting.
So great reminder then, if you want to pick up a copy of Julie's book, you should definitely pick it up from Nantucket Book Partners. We'll put a link below. Order it tonight, and you can request it to be signed this weekend. So perfect timing on that part. So Julie, I love Daughters of Nantucket. I mean, I loved it 4 years ago when I read it in class, but I got the chance to sit down under the covers and read it last week. I'll admit I did text Julie as I got to different parts saying, wait, what's happening? And I really loved it. I'm not the only one. There's been so much wonderful feedback. BookBub calls your book one of their most anticipated historical fiction novels of the year. It's one of Zibby Owen's most anticipated books of the year. Booklist gave you a starred review and calls the book a beautiful historical novel. It's that's engrossing and emotional. You expertly weave the narratives of the three main characters together. And what else did they say? Oh, with some characters inspired by actual historical figure, Gerstenblatt's distinctive tale is a triumph of storytelling, and it celebrates the courage and tenacity of women. Triumph of storytelling. I would have that tattooed across my face.
That was a good morning. That was like, I was really nauseous for a few months before, like January came and I was like, it's 2023, my book is coming out. And then there's like a lot of just waiting. Yeah. So the morning I woke up and saw that, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to be okay.
Self-Awareness also gave you a starred review and also called the book engrossing, and said that your eye for detail results in sultry historical fiction, perfect for Sue Monk kid fans. I love her books. Yes. And that your book ponders bravery, prejudice, and what is worth fighting for. Congrats, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for our audience out there who have not yet read Daughters of Nantucket, what is it about? Tell us, like, give us how would you describe your book?
So I would say it's about three different women whose lives intersect in the days leading up to and immediately following Nantucket's Great Fire of 1846. And I actually have a story exactly about what Tim was talking about, Mitchell's and Bookworks being kind of different, even though they're under, the same umbrella ownership. I read about the Great Fire in like 2 paragraphs in Nat Philbrick's History of the Island. And I walked in to Mitchell's and I said, give me everything you have on the fire. And they said, we have nothing. Try Bookworks. And so I went to Bookworks, and actually they're like, yeah, we have a self-published History of the Fire. And so it's like, if you can't find it at one bookstore, you might get it at another. And then also I got different like historical, books at each one, and kind of gathered up that summer, the summer of 2018, all my reading materials to dig into this about the Great Fire. So it started with the fire. And then, although I don't think of myself as a writer of action adventure, that's kind of what it became. And then I figured who would be there and created these 3 characters.
I love that you did part of your research at Tim's Bookstores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that's
yeah,
even more full
connection.
Yeah, no, but that's really beautiful. That you came in there to get some background material, and here you are getting to have your book on the shelf there.
It is very really like beautiful. I said in a post I made maybe about this or the weekend, that it's very meta to to write a book about Nantucket and then I haven't been there since the book came out in March. So to be going this Friday, it's very exciting, and it is kind of surreal.
So what inspired you to write this story? And actually, the way I usually phrase it to guests is, what was the spark that inspired the story? Which feels a little bit too on the nose for you, but like what I mean, I've heard you say that you read, you were reading a book by Nathaniel Philbrick.
Right.
So, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so he wrote, I think his first nonfiction, like longer work, was The History of Nantucket, since he lived on the island, and it's called Away Offshore, and it covers, you know, the 200 years kind of from English settlers coming to the end of the whaling industry. And I really fell, you know, right into page 13 or 11 or something are these two paragraphs about the fire. And then he moves on, and there's, you know, whales and oil and all the rest of it. And I was like, no, wait, stop. I want to know more. So that was the spark for the story. And then I kind of thought about, and then I read up everything I could about that time period, because if I was setting something during that, and I have to say, I am not a huge fan of, like, I'm not, American history to me is so Puritans and Quakers. It's not like sexy, you know, it lacks a little something. Like, give me France, sure, you know, give me Paris between the wars, give me the Italian Riviera, like, ooh, right? So even I had to be convinced that this could be compelling to set a story in a place that was so ruled by Quaker laws and a very male dominated, you know, whaling existence. And it just took me a minute. So I had to read about women at the time, and suffragists and abolitionists and different women from history, and kind of get into it, and then find my way to these three main characters.
Do you remember what the first scene was when you sat down to write the book? And is it included in the book? Did it change very much?
Yeah, so since Kimberly's in my writing workshop, and we started together at Grub Street, I took a Grub Street class, and it was about, I think it was like 10 pages a week, and we did a few scenes. And so the first scene I wrote was inspired by, and it is in the book, it was inspired by this exercise that we did in the class. And it was, a character gets off a bus in her hometown and like walks home with her suitcase, like she hasn't been there in years, and passes things. And it's like a way to see the town. So I have, the first thing I wrote was Eliza Macy walking from her house on Upper Main Street down to the harbor. Okay. And I wanted to make sure she passed some notable places that I knew would be important later on, whether for the fire or other reasons. And I wanted to kind of start with this domestic place that she lived in, and the harbor where she had to deliver a letter to get to her husband, who has, you know, who spends most of his life at sea. Excellent. That is in the book. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I have more book questions for you, but I want to ask Tim about the Nantucket Book Festival, because that's something you're very involved with. And it's so interesting that an island that's so small has such a well-known and well-received book festival. It speaks a lot to the community that this is a priority, right? A priority for literature, a priority to cultivate ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about what's coming up for this year's festival, what you're excited about? It's in June. So for the people out there who are like hankering to come to Nantucket, maybe this year's too late, but they can definitely plan for next year.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite weekends. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary of the festival last year. So this is the 11th annual. It's June 15th through the 18th. Julie is a featured author, which we're really excited about. Her event, I think, is on Sunday with Betsy Tyler interviewing her. And I am in conversation with Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan, who wrote Mad Honey. So I'm really excited about that. And then I'm also in conversation with Emma Straub, who I think we all love. She's so much fun. And so I'm excited I have never met Emma, so I'm really excited to meet her. And just so many different authors from lot of different genres, and just, our whole mission is to really amplify the transformative power of literature to just really get out there. I'm really excited to hear Jodi speak about book banning, because that is something that, she's being featured a lot in talking about, and I think is just really important for us bookstores and any readers, really. Excellent. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I've been involved. I actually was without knowing it, I was at the first book festival. I was at the brewery, and it was the Sunday, and I was sitting there, and I was talking about books or something, and they're like, "Oh, it's the book festival right there." So I've been a part of of every festival without really kind of knowing that I have been. If you would have told me that day you'd be very, very involved in everything in 10 years, I would have said you were crazy. But
who has been your favorite guest over the years? The one that when people say, "Tell me about the book festival," the one that you're like, "Oh, I got to tell you this story."
I'm going to have to say we've had Jodi Picoult a couple of times. She was always someone, this is such a crazy story. I asked her when I couldn't think of who I wanted to marry, my husband and I, to run the ceremony. I was like, you know what? Jodi has really inspired me with her books. So I'm just going to email her and ask her. And she was very kind and emailed me back and said, "No, I'm sorry. I can't do that." Well, fast forward to that book festival that she came, and we became such good friends after that. I've been to all of her children's weddings, and we've just it's just been such a spark of friendship and connection. And that's really what I love about the Nantucket Book Festival is it's a very small roster. There are 25 to 30 authors. Everyone gets their own event at their own time, and it's really an intimate experience of literature and readers and writers, and it really can create those connections and friendships that I think we all love about books. So I mean, I've had several like that, but I think that's the one that stands out to me.
Is there a guest that you've not yet been able to get on the show? I was going to ask who your white whale is. I'm like really committed to this Nantucket theme. But is there like a guest that you have not yet been able to get that is on your dream list? Because I know we have a dream list for this show. Obviously, we're checking off today one of those things. But I'm wondering if you have someone else. Should we put it out to the universe?
Yes, and I've been so close each year, but it's Stephen King. I mean, he's just he's been one of my favorite writers since I was probably too young to be even reading him, and I'm very. I mean, I have the contact. It's just not working out each year because obviously he's been in this business for a long time, and it can be quite busy. But maybe some year.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. And if you and I would like to have an offline conversation about how traumatized you can be if you read Stephen King too young, we can talk about Pet Sematary.
Who is your white whale?
I have a list. I really would love to talk to Jessamine Ward. She's a new book coming out this fall.
That book looks dynamic.
Yeah, we have been able to make that happen. And then my other one is Diana Gabaldon.
Okay. Yes.
So I put it out to the universe. I've actually never said that publicly before, so I'll just
She's another one, and just like Julie's book that I kind of wanted to say is like historical fiction just puts the humanity back in history. I was a history major, and sometimes it's just about facts and it's about dates. And what Julie's book really did is it reads almost like that contemporary modern book that she was saying that, Julie, that you've written before that didn't work. And it reads like that. And what it really got me thinking is it really that modern? Because those women were probably dealing with those same things, sex, gossip, all that stuff is in there. We just don't know that about history. And that's what I think you really, really did so well in Daughters of Nantucket is you brought the humanity back to history. And that's what I really loved most about it.
Thank you. Yeah, that was definitely a goal of mine. And I like hearing that people say it doesn't feel like old fashioned or like inaccessible. Because like I had said earlier, like that wasn't interesting to me. And uncovering like all that good stuff because, just because history has kind of didn't talk about in particular women and their like love lives and all of that. I wanted to bring that to the surface.
I'm so glad you said that, Tim, because that's actually my next question.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
No. I love it that you said it because I felt the exact same. I had the exact same experience reading the book that it felt very modern to me. And I'm someone who's often conflicted about historical fiction because sometimes it feels too removed from my life. And yet I felt as a woman in 2023 that I understood these women in 1846. And I think, one of the real strengths of the book, Julie, is the way that you weave in all of these really important topics: racism, parenting, money. Mariah Mitchell has her family's Quaker and they can't play the piano. That's like against their religion, and that like struggle to celebrate your art, and yet the conflict with religion. So I think there's like so many beautiful themes that are woven in here that I agree, Tim. I think it's one of the reasons why it feels so relevant to 2023. And I wonder, Julie, if that was like a deliberate decision on your part, excuse me, or if it just kind of came naturally because that's kind of who you are and that's how you've written, or did you think about that consciously?
I did not think about it consciously, but as I read about what was going on at the time, I was like, oh, this is kind of like now, or this is similar to, and that made it interesting for me. And so then I made sure to include those things and wonder about things like, what do you do if your husband's away for 4 years and you're lonely and desperate? And, what might a woman do? And so there's several choices there for Eliza. What would you do if your daughter was in the first class of integrated, a Black girl in an integrated classroom that's threatened and never feels really safe? What would you do if you were that mom? And what would you do if your love was forbidden in the time period? Because the idea that, that nobody was gay, and in particular, I would think women in the 1840s on Nantucket, I'm sure somebody was a lesbian. I just feel it certain that somebody was. So why not write about, if given that opportunity, why not explore what that person might have done to try to live and as much as she could an honest and truthful sense of self.
The other thing that I really loved about the book was the structure. I was thinking about how I would describe it, and it felt almost like a relay race. We have 3 points of view, and it's one character's almost like passing the baton to the next, to the next, to the next, and advancing the story. And I loved that structure. I wondered how you landed on it. And I also wondered if you had a favorite character to write.
Sure. So that structure, writing from 3 points of view, was something I did in a novel I wrote right before this one that I only wrote about 100 pages of. And it was 3 women who returned to their college reunion to face a man who's being awarded like the alumni of the year, but who had raped one of them at college, and contemporary, obviously. And so I had these 3 women narrate points of view, and I loved that, even though I didn't complete the novel. And so I knew that I would write from 3 points of view. However, I didn't know that it took a long time for them to overlap and, like you say, pass the baton. That's how I think of it too. Like, it took a while for the narrative to collapse enough and the editing to happen where like one day it just was like, they're in the same place and I'm going to be able to really move it. I was doing a lot of like, one person is here, one person is there, and then kind of telling to get them to the same place instead of figuring out how to put them there. And what that was a teacher had said, actually Jenna Blum had said, you have to keep them in order. You can't tell them out of order. Once you've established Eliza, Mariah, Meg, you can't switch. And that made it so that people were not in the right place at the right time to pass the baton. And once I said, no, I don't have to do that. There's only 3 people, we can keep up with them no matter what order they're in. I could tell the right person got the right part of the next of story, but it took a long time.
That's interesting because I never, if you had asked me, I wouldn't have been able to tell you like what the order was.
Yeah, because it doesn't really matter. You see them once I've established those 3 and nobody else is going to magically appear. I think that's giving readers some ownership of it and being like, these are the rules. We're going to have these 3 people and you don't know when you're getting them. But you're not going to miss any one of them for too long.
Did you write each storyline like throughout until the end, or did you kind of switch on and off? And was that difficult?
I wrote chronologically, which meant I was writing different people.
Okay.
I know someone who writes into timelines and two narrators, and she writes those stories and then braids them together after. But for me, with being in the same time period in particular, I just started alternating points of view right away.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then you asked my favorite character. I mean, I'm not going to pick one of the big ones, so I'm going to go with Joseph Allen.
Oh yeah, he's a cutie.
He's a cutie, and he sort of like knocked on my brain. Some sort of like Dickensian like kid showed up, and he was like, "Miss, I'm here. I wanted work in your novel. What can I do? Put me to work." You know, and I was like, "Go to the Athenaeum." You know, help Mariah Mitchell.
So we're putting links below to Mariah Mitchell so you can learn more about her, to the Athenaeum, to Nantucket in general. So people who don't have the great pleasure of going to Nantucket this weekend for Daffodil Days can check out more about what Julie and Tim are talking about. So I know that Daughters of Nantucket is my favorite book about Nantucket. And I wondered, what would you two say? I mean, obviously you can say your own book, Julie, but I'm curious if there's a book when you, and Tim, especially in the bookstore, if someone comes in, because I know they come in and they say, I'm here on vacation, I want to read something about Nantucket, where do you send them? What do you gravitate toward?
I mean, I think I have two certain places that I'll put them. Like In the Heart of the Sea is probably my first Nantucket book that I read. It's by Nat Philbrick, the same one that wrote Away Offshore that Julie had some research with. It's the true story of Moby Dick. So whereas I would love to be able to say that I have read Moby Dick, I have tried numerous times. And for decor reasons in my house, I think I have maybe 9 copies of it around. But I have not read it, and I try to read it, and I can't. But In the Heart of the Sea is the true story, and it's fascinating and thrilling, and Nat Philbrick is an amazing historian, and so I love it. And then also my work wife, I work really closely with Ellen Hildebrand, New York Times bestselling author of about 30 titles. She's the person I think I have on speed dial. She has me on speed dial, and we're constantly working together. And so I would definitely give readers one of hers, because what's fun about those is that you're really like in the story, because the characters they're going to Mitchell's, they're going to the restaurants, they're going to the galas and everything. And that's my life. So it's really fun to read along knowing that like I'm doing that right now, because I don't have to have much of an imagination to visualize it, because it's what I do. So those were two.
Well, it's always fun to read a book and say, "Oh, I ate dinner there. Oh, that's where I get my haircut." Oh, Ellen Hildebrand is such a wonderful ambassador for Nantucket. I mean, for books in general, but definitely for Nantucket. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those, and I think really, and I've been reading Ellen, and because I've been on Nantucket, since she's been writing there. So I read The Blue Bistro and followed her all the way through. So I love all of them. And I had a professor once at Columbia who talked about art and life and overlapping. And I would never forget, she's like, you live in New York City. When you go to see a movie, a Woody Allen movie, and you walk out of that theater, you're still in that Woody Allen movie. And that is what happens when you're on Nantucket reading an Ellen Hildebrand novel. Art and life collapse on each other. And it is really fun and special, because you're like reading about crew on the beach, and then you're like going to crew that night. So that's great.
And also, and Susie just said this too in a comment, but also Nancy Thayer is just one of such a beloved, treasured author. And the same thing, you're right there with the characters on Nantucket and everything.
Yes.
My husband actually, these are their 2 new books that are coming out this spring and then this summer. And my husband and I are characters in the 5-Star Weekend. So
no way!
Are in it. And when I was reading, I got to chapter 9 and I was like, wait a minute. And it was really funny to read.
You didn't know that. It was a surprise.
No, Ellen had said that there was some sort of surprise coming, so I was kind of expecting as I was reading it this winter, but it just I was like, oh wow, that's fun. And it was fun because I really am in there.
Yeah. And so we're going to include links below to all the books that you're talking about. And then everyone should go pick up the new Ellen Hildebrand to find Tim in the book.
Right.
Yes. And for other reasons too.
Yes.
Yeah, and Nancy's been such a great support for me, and she was an early reader and wrote a blurb, which was terrific. And I love I love all of her books, and I'm excited for this new one too.
Yeah.
And then
It's really gorgeous. And what we came
yeah.
up with Random House is a special pocket calendar that you get of all your days of summer. So if you pre-order from Nantucket Book Partners, you get that little pocket calendar while supplies last, and it's really fun. And it has Nancy's signings in it, has Nancy's bucket list for summer, and it's really great.
Oh,
So
cool.
just for our audience, it's called All the Days of Summer. It's Nancy Thayer. You can pre-order. Well, it comes out next week.
Yeah, comes out May 2nd, but you can get it on Saturday with Julie's signing too.
And Nancy's signing as well.
Yes.
So that's actually a great segue into talking a little bit about the literary community on Nantucket. You have Nancy Thayer and Ellen Hildebrand both live there, and I imagine there are others that I am delinquent in mentioning. And you have the Nantucket Book Festival. You have 2 bookstores on an island that's only 13 miles long. So clearly there's something in the water there where people are committed to books. How would you describe the literary community? What is it about the island that makes people love books so much and support books and authors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, I mean, Melville was here and wrote Moby Dick on about Nantucket. So, I mean, it goes back years and generations. I think it's such a place that just, it inspires. It really does inspire. I would have never considered myself a writer. And there are days in the winter that I'm like, there is a story and it takes place on this island and it's there somewhere, or could maybe be there somewhere. Probably similarly to Julie. It's just like, write what you love and know. You know, the 30 who in New York and the 40 who, but you loved Nantucket for all these years. And then look what happened when you finally gave your heart over to that. So I think that that is what the literary landscape of Nantucket is basically those people. And there are so many local writers in our Nantucket room at Mitchell's and at Bookworks too. Really, we try our best to, highlight all of them, and they're all featured up there. And it's not, you're maybe not the New York Times bestseller, but you still have a spot there because there's a book for every person, and we really try to make that known, especially if it's about Nantucket or written on Nantucket by a local author. So that's what that room really does. And I think just really the book festival really tries to support that. There's a local author's tent that is part of the book festival all weekend. And so we just really want to host that inspiration that Nantucket is.
Excellent. So definitely to our audience, if you're not able to get to Nantucket, but you feel like after this conversation, you must visit in your mind, we want you to check out Julie's book, link below, but also check out the links to the bookstores, which will also include below. And you can see their recommended books, their local authors, or even give them a call. And I'm sure they'd be happy to connect you with a book if you are not certain what to pick up after you read Daughters of Nantucket.
The fun thing about Jenna was talking about like being there in the scene. The fun thing about Daughters of Nantucket is a very timely place. It doesn't change that much. So when you're talking about Eliza walking down the street, I was right there with her because even though it was 1846, I can still picture that walk down to the harbor because it's a very similar walk that I take to the harbor. And not many places in the United States or the world can really say that I can read a book so far in the past, but yet still visualize it. And that's another really fun thing I had with reading Daughters of Nantucket, of the Athenaeum and everything they were dealing with, is I could really picture it.
Yeah, that's I think part of what made it accessible to me to write it was that it is like that map is still pretty much the same, and the streets and all that. And so there's a map in the front now of the final copy, and I love it. And I got to help make it. And I tell people, like, take out your pencil and like pen and put in like the hub and like add Murray's and add Mitchell's, because it is like right. It is right there. So I'm glad that was there for you.
So we have some audience questions. And so here's one from Eileen. Eileen asks, Julie, is there a book 2 in the works?
Well, hi, Eileen. Yes, thanks for the question. And yes, there is. I had to cut one of my favorite characters from the book. Her name is Nell Starbuck, and I have one sentence about her now that says Nell Starbuck is on a global shopping trip with her merchant husband. And so book 2 is going to be that trip. And so it'll start 5 years after this one ends. So it ends with like a few little unanswered questions, and you get hints to those answers at the beginning as Nell is packing for her trip, and some people from the first book come and visit, and you get to see them. And then off they go by clipper ship, which is the fastest ship that ever sailed the seas around Cape Horn to San Francisco at the height of the gold rush, and then on to China, where calamity ensues.
I love all these words: calamity, merriment.
Yeah.
I love these.
And then
words.
a third will be about two sisters from Nantucket who go on their European tour, kind of like A Room with a View, but with more, you know, a sassier Room with a View.
It's a good tagline. Okay, and then from Mark Cecil, who is the host of Mighty Blazes, The Thoughtful Bro. I'm just wondering if there might be a way to see a basket live on the show. Julie is the owner of a beloved Nantucket basket. She and I are wearing our Nantucket basket necklaces. Like that might be all we can.
That's really all, Mark. And if you want to, though, I have made a video, and you can find it on Instagram in my feed. And I have my basket bracelet, but I thought, oh, maybe I should grab it and put it right here, but I do not have it with me. But I'll be carrying it. If you look at me in like most pictures from Nantucket, there's like me in the basket. It's really, my husband hates the basket. It's such an annoying accessory. And I'm always like, can you hold this for me? I'm like, where does it go on the table when you dine? And it's, you know, I love it, but you know, it's not a very kind of contemporary friendly accessory.
Tim, I want to make sure before we sign off that we ask you about Tim Talks Books. So this is your way. You have many ways of connecting readers and authors, but can you tell us a little bit about what's in store for Tim Talks Books, how people can connect with you, what's planned for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it came about very similarly to A Mighty Blaze, and this author loved bookstores. It was the pandemic, and it was, here's this person that just wants to get a favorite book in a reader's hands and say how much I love this. And I didn't have that opportunity in person. And so I kind of took it to the airwaves, and it's just been it's been such a great experience. I've been so lucky to have so many authors be willing to chat with me and talk with me. And last year was just so many highlights happened. I got to talk to Oprah and Barbara Kingsolver on Oprah's book club conversation. And I got to interview Jen Weiner here on Nantucket, and just so many different places that I just never would have dreamed of. So it's been a great thing. It's on Instagram on Tim Talks Books, and on a website too. And it's been great. It's been I'm sure you can share that.
It's already below. So
yeah, it's just no, I meant you can share the sentiment of how this has just fulfilled your life, to be able to read a book that you love like Julie's, and then to be able to connect and talk to the author with that. You just couldn't have created something better for bookworms like us, I feel. So it's been wonderful. Thank you for mentioning it.
Of course. And the link is below to check out your website. And absolutely, I share. Yes.
I do want to add one more thing. So this is N Magazine. It's the magazine that I write that column in.
Yes. And
it just came out. It's a new issue. And I think it's so apropos for Julie's book, because it's called Leading Ladies of Nantucket. And it goes into every, basically how women are such a power force on this island. And they were all the way back in 1846, and they still are. So if you're here this weekend, not only should you grab Julie's book, Daughters of Nantucket, and Nancy's book, All the Days of Summer, pick up a copy of N Magazine, because it's really diving into all of these women that are leading our nonprofits and are taking our island into the future. And it's really inspiring. And I'm really, really, really lucky to be able to work with all of these just dynamic and powerful and inspirational women. So it's a great issue with a lot of stories, but that one was really empowering. And I thought so great with ties so nicely into Julie's book.
Cool.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing. We've also included the link below to your column in the magazine, and so people can check that out. As the clock is running down on our time, though I could talk to the two of you for a long time, forever, I want to ask a speed question. Someone is coming to Nantucket for the first time. They've already decided to come to Mitchell's and Bookworks. That's already on their list. What is the one other thing that they must do?
Oh, wow. Is it just me or does Julie have to answer?
You both have to answer.
I know. I'm like, well, do you want me to go first? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like simple, but I'll just go to my favorite place would be to take a walk on a beach. And I know, if you're at Mitchell's, I'm going to say then you did town, so I'm going to just take you somewhere else, and that would be, to walk for me as like the romantic heart of historical fiction, to walk on Surfside Beach and imagine that that's where they first caught whales and brought them to the shore and dismantled them there, and where the whole history of the Nantucket whaling industry began. And now where you can just really have a great day with your family, hanging out and having a picnic on the beach or taking a long walk and chatting with a friend.
Excellent.
Yeah. I guess mine is similar. I would say as long as there are birds that kind of inhibit this from happening sometimes, but my favorite day is my Jeep drives on the beach and we pack a lunch or even a breakfast and we drive all the way out to Great Point, which is the third lighthouse. If you look at the shape of the island, it's the third one. It's the farthest away. Not everyone can go to it. And it's just my favorite day to drive. It takes about half an hour to drive on the sand. And it's just such a special experience that you don't get to have very many places. So I would say that's my favorite thing to do if you can do it.
Yeah.
But there are plovers that are, and I don't want to speak ill of the plovers, but it just keeps me from getting to Great Point during certain parts of the year.
Not only the plovers, but we went last summer. We did do that with my family and we hadn't done it for a long time. And we went out and couldn't get all the way out there, but also couldn't go in the water because of the seals and the sharks.
Yes.
So
it's a dangerous place of wildlife.
Totally amazing. Totally.
Yeah.
It is
it's like
an amazing
Nantucket safari out there with seals and plovers and
yeah.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful and very special place. Thank you very much, the two of you, for sharing your Nantucket with us. I'm sure you can make a much longer list of things that you love, but you've given us a good indication of the highlights, and we're grateful for that. Tim, our last question goes to you. Please finish this sentence for us. Running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
I'm going to say connection.
Ooh.
It's my favorite word. And I think there's so much connection so many connections when it comes to literature. And it's not only reading a book and connecting with the author or and the bookstore, but also it's been me working with authors and just really being able to bring their books and put them in readers' hands, that connection that like now I feel like Julie and I have, and you and I have, Kimberly, that's just something super special. And it's the magic of literature and books.
I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, I can't wait to Daffy with you in like 3 days.
Yes, I'm going to come by the bookstore. Absolutely. We will be part of Julie's posse at her book signing.
We'll take a picture and we'll all be in floral outfits and you will say, what kind of circus are they on? And it's just, we are on Nantucket Island for Daffodil Festival.
I warned my friends. I was like, I did it. I bought green pants. You're going to have to, just so you know.
To our audience, if you liked today's show, and we certainly hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze on Facebook to get notified about all of our other events. Or if you're not a Facebook person, hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to sign up for a newsletter. It goes out once a week and gives you the rundown of all of the shows. We will be back next week, next Wednesday, May 3rd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will be traveling to the great state of Nebraska to welcome author Joy Castro, along with 2 bookstores, Indigo Bridge and Francie and Finch. I guess this is a theme. We had 2 this week. We have 2 next week. Please join us back then for another episode of Authors Love Bookstores. Until then, be well and keep reading. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks.